Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again on Friday. Let's get right down to our Torah lesson. There's a lot here. This week's Shabbat is Parashat Shkalim. Not only are we going to read the regular portion, we're going to be completing the book of Exodus. We're going to also reading an additional portion called Parashat Shkalim. It's one of the 4 special portions that we read at this time of year. Not only that, next week is already, we're starting the month of Adar coming up, and Purim, Passover, wonderful things are at our doorstep. On the other hand, unfortunately, we haven't felt the winter so much. There's hardly any rain here in Israel, and the question is why? Why is there rain in Israel? I want to talk about that. Maybe we're not here talking with prophets why it hasn't been raining, but things are very clear in our sources why it doesn't rain in the land, and I want to talk a little bit about that today. Before I do this week's portion will be dedicated in the memory of Tuvia Zimmerman, a very special man who is living here with his son and daughter-in-law. The Zimmermans, Alon Zimmerman, his father just passed away, and the funeral will be 2 o'clock here on Itamar today, and we want to honor his memory with this lesson. Let's get right down to the lesson. The question is, this week's portion begins with Moshe Rabbeinu giving the accounting of all the different materials and metals that went into building the tabernacle. And the question, of course, must be asked, why? Moshe Rabbeinu is the most ne'eman person, the most reliable person in God's eyes in the world. God says it right out in the Torah. He's ne'eman, meaning he's reliable. Why does he have to give an accounting? And the Midrash gives a very difficult Midrash discussion of the story of why Moshe Rabbeinu decided to give this accounting of the tabernacle. And it says, if you look in Exodus 33, verse 8, it says the Jewish people were looking at Moshe Rabbeinu. He's coming out to go into the tent. Everyone was standing at their tents, and they were looking at Moshe Rabbeinu from behind. And there were people saying different things, whatever it was. One very strong comment was made was, look at Moshe Rabbeinu's neck, how fat it is. Big, strong neck. Someone said, why do you blame him? He was in charge. Why shouldn't he be rich, right? He was building the tabernacle. Which means because he was rich, he had a lot of money, he was able to have a big neck, right? Eating, whatever it was. It was a disgusting thing to say about Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu heard about this, and he decided to go ahead and give a complete accounting to show he took nothing for himself and has no self-interest. And we know it's so unfair to talk this way about Moshe Rabbeinu. Look, when everyone left Egypt, they were taking the spoils of Egypt with them. What does Moshe Rabbeinu take when he left Egypt? He took the bones of Joseph. He was always interested in, again, something way beyond the physical material. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. To reflect how much Moshe Rabbeinu is always interested in the spiritual, there's another beautiful Talmudic passage which talks about a meeting between Moshe Rabbeinu and Mitzalel. And God, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Mitzalel, you got to build a tabernacle, right? But he tells him a certain order of how to do it. He says, first build the Aron, which means the ark, and the vessels, and then build the house. And Mitzalel says to Moshe Rabbeinu, wait a second. Did I hear right? Maybe you meant the opposite. First build a house, then the vessels. Because if I build the vessels first, where am I going to put them? A person first builds a home, and then he brings the furniture into the house. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, wow, you are in the shadow of God, of course. That's what God meant. Whatever it was. Mitzalel was so wise, he knew how to combine letters that the heavens and earth were created with them. Whatever it is. We see over here, Moshe Rabbeinu, his interest was something on the furniture, right? On the Aron, the ark. And Mitzalel was talking more about the house. And we see in this world, we know there are 2 types of people. There are those who do practical things, who are excellent at the building, right? And you need them in this world. You have those who are the ones that worry about the spiritual building, right? There's also another kind of building. So Moshe Rabbeinu's whole life was focused on the spiritual. That's why he really focused on the vessels. Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, was right in his own way. The whole purpose of this house is because of the furniture, because of what was going in there, what they represent. The ark, what does the ark represent? That represents Torah. Ki ner mitzvah v'torah or, because a mitzvah is likened to a candle, and the Torah is light of the entire universe. And Moshe Rabbeinu was so interested more than anything in having the Torah shine and light up the world. And that's what he said. He wanted, right now, let's focus on the purpose of this whole building, not for external building. Big deal, right? But anyway, this shows, getting back to what we were saying, it shows how much Moshe Rabbeinu was involved in only one thing, the spiritual side of things. That was really, he wasn't worried about physical. Never meant anything to him. But nevertheless, he was always tormented, unfortunately, as a leader. And he had to, right away, clear his name, because it's important for a person also to clear his name. A person shouldn't going around letting people suspect, certain things about that person. That's also, we learned from here, that you shouldn't allow that. You should clarify and have a clean name. It's very important as well. But anyway, you see here Moshe Rabbeinu, and the focus of Moshe Rabbeinu, what he stands for, what he wants in this world. There's also another very difficult midrash, which I must mention. It all comes together and then connects with what I opened up with, is when after the tabernacle was completed, we know it was completed when? On Kaf Hei Kislev, on the 25th of Kislev, which was Hanukkah. That's when the tabernacle was completed. 70 days after they began, we discussed last week, the dates, right, on Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain, and then 2 days of gathering the stuff and start to build the Mishkan, and finally it was completed 70 days later, around 7 days later, on Kaf Hei Kislev, on Hanukkah. But everything was put in baggage and packed away until when? Until Nisan, the month of Nisan, really 7 days before, the 23rd of the month of Adar, where Moshe Rabbeinu was called the Yemei Miluim, the getting ready for building the tabernacle. And finally it was built, it was established on the first day of the month of Nisan. So the question was, what happened during this period of time? And the Midrash in Tanchuma brings down a difficult story that, after the tabernacle, everyone collected all the stuff and it was all ready, and it was all ready to go and build. They didn't want to wait to when Moshe Rabbeinu told them to wait, which was Nisan, the month of Nisan, and they were trying to set it up. And what would happen? They would set it up and it would fall down. Then they went to Bitzalel. You tried to set up. He tried to fall down. And people said, what did Moshe Rabbeinu collect all this money for? What is this going on over here for nothing? Something that's not going to stand, a building that's not going to stand. And then, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu takes charge, and finally in the month of Adar and Miluim, the month of getting it ready, and every single day he's setting it up and taking it apart, and he's the one who establishes the Mishkan. And everyone realizes without Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mishkan's not going to stand. And of course, one of the deep meanings behind this midrash is to show that the intrinsic value is more important than anything, right? Moshe Rabbeinu represents Torah, who represents the spiritual component of the Mishkan. Without that, it can't stand. The physical world, the physical parts will not be able to stand up themselves without the spiritual. Whatever it was, he had to go through this also difficult situation, blaming him again on collecting money for nothing. And we see constant complaints. Moshe Rabbeinu's whole life was surrounded by complaints. This relates to what Maral talks about. What is the rectification of the Jewish people? What is our rectification in this world? And that's called unity. Because we're a nation who's monotheistic, right? We teach the entire world, there's only one God in the world. We constantly have to rectify the oneness, and that's why we are always divided, unfortunately. Always arguing, 10 Jews in a room, 10 opinions in a room. And unfortunately, this is part of our, fortunately, we have to rectify it. We have to work on rectifying this. And I always say the world today, we're surrounded by craziness in this world. What is going on? And I don't like talking difficult things, but I'm not talking now, only about what's happening because of the European Union, the United States pressuring Israel to form a Palestinian state and all kinds of, the threats that surround Israel today. Because the truth is, where does that come from? The Jewish people, we ourselves are to blame, because if we are united and we work together in unison, then all these external forces that are coming against us will not succeed, and they will completely dissipate. It comes from us as a nation of Israel getting our job together. And that's why God gave us such an important mitzvah, building the tabernacle, where there is so much in the Torah that's invested in building. There's so much details, 4 portions. In part of Kitisa, it's amazing how much out of the book of Exodus deals with building this tabernacle, which is a temporary structure. But God is so happy when we work together in a common goal of doing something important. And therefore, so much detail is mentioned in the Torah to show how important it is. Because God is hinting us, you must get together, work together, unify yourselves. And that, of course, connects us to Shkalim. This week's portion is also Parashat Shkalim, when we know in the first Rosh Chodesh Adar, the new month of Adar, they would announce the court to everyone to bring the half a shekel for the Beit HaMikdash, for the temple, which was in the first of Nisan. They would begin to bring the sacrifices, the public sacrifices, which are the burnt offerings twice a day, Korban Tamid and Musaf offerings, from the new money that was contributed to the tabernacle. And this was, what does it all mean? The tabernacle, the month of Adar was all collected for the sacrifices. What does it all mean that everyone has to give a half a shekel? Everyone had to give this half a shekel coin. And the half, of course, is only a half. You need another shekel to become a whole. Again, it's reflecting upon the unity. We must unify, all involved in doing something together in a communal way, which is so important. And that's what the Machzit HaShekel represents, to try to unite the people of Israel together. And this all connects to what we're talking about. The difficulty that surrounds Israel today is only because of our lack of unity. We must work together and work together. And it's so painful. I sit here, I'm talking to you, my dear friends, abroad. I don't know if you're all aware of what's going on in Israel. We have a very difficult time on a social level. Chevra, as we say in Hebrew, the chevra, the social, the society today is very, we have a lot of tension here between the non-religious world, the religious world. Amongst the religious world, we have the ultra-Orthodox that don't want to join the service, the army, and it's causing a lot of problems. I heard a crazy thing today that one of the leaders calling for a mass exodus of leaving Israel, going to Lakewood, New Jersey, because they don't want, to avoid the draft here in Israel, which is also something very painful, because we have to work together, knowing that every Jew is responsible to fight for one another and defend the country. I mean, wow, all of us, our children, we all serve in the army together with Torah. We have to have one hand a sword, one hand the Torah. We can't give up and say, okay, God's going to protect us. We have to, again, do what we can on our own personal level, right? As much as we can, and then God, of course, does the rest. But we can't sit back and say, okay, they're going to defend us. It's a very, very difficult thing, and there's nothing greater than, of course, the study of Torah, which we love more than anything and we respect. But the terrible thing in the country today, that the secular world says, we're going to battle, and these Torah Jews don't want to defend the country. Of course, it's on a small level. There are many Torah Jews that go, like our community, everyone fights in there, everyone's the highest elite units in the Israeli army. But we're talking about certain groups. There are large numbers of ultra-Orthodox that still have this mentality of exile, that this is not a religious state, therefore it has nothing to do with God, it's just whatever it is. I'm getting into difficult things here. But again, this is the wrong approach. We have to realize that Hashem brought us back to the land. We have to thank God for the wonderful blessing. But we all have to work on reaching out with love for one another. And these ultra-Orthodox Jews have a lot to offer in wonderful, the great knowledge of Torah and the way they practice, the details of the Torah they're so experts on. But certain things, we have arguments, and we have to try to, between brothers, show our brotherly love. Because if we don't get together, we're going to bring about enemies all around us. And the answer, of course, is not golf, but to run away from the land. That's insanity. So we have to really try to work together and to bring peace. And that will bring rain. Why isn't it raining? The raining comes to do with, our rabbis teach us, with the clouds coming together. Right? We all know what causes rain, clouds coming together. And that's achdut, unity. And unfortunately, when we show lack of unity amongst each other, amongst the people of Israel, then how can it rain? It's of course going to be, but if we unify and work for brotherly love, God will bring the clouds together. We'll have tons and tons of rain in the land of Israel. But let's pray that we unite, pray that we show love for one another, and this will bring the final redemption for all of us. Shabbat Shalom, Lehi Tov.